So that question, how come the scriptures, which are so powerful, don't more naturally lead us here? And what can we do about it? And I think it's a great question. Why did I give a whole message that wasn't a sermon? Because sometimes the heart of God is needed to inform the words or the context that God gives us in Scripture. So Jesus was looking at the Pharisees and the scribes and the teachers of the law, and he's saying, you guys have all of the words and all of the books, and you have most of them memorized, yet you don't understand the big picture. And the big picture is that there should be solidarity between you and others, that you can't just look after your own tribe and then somehow have an indifferent eye to those outside of that family or that tribe. And so Jesus sometimes would say, we've got to reframe this and give perspective in order for you to kind of move deeper. Today I was trying to do that. Let's talk about truth. And try and reframe some of this. And then, yes, when we go and we look at some of these things and we begin to see love your neighbor in the Samaritan story, we begin to realize how radical it was. That Jesus is like, man, you guys don't get this, but the immigrant down the road here living in apartments that are just off the main road, so we don't know that there's a lot of Hispanics living in Bend, but there are. That guy that doesn't have documentation or whatever, he got it. You were so busy that you didn't actually love the person that needed to be loved, but he loved them, and that's the example for you, right? I mean, the kinds of things Jesus was saying were revolutionary. You've heard it said, love those, whatever, or pray for those who, whatever. I say, love your enemy and pray for that person. Go all the way to the extreme and pray for ISIS. And pray for the cop killer's family. Ouch. And pray for the family of the cop who ended someone's life based on what was going on in him in terms of his perceived threat. I mean, the people that are somehow the bad guy in both these stories, their families are traumatized too. Let's not forget praying for them and the things going through their minds and their loss and their pain. Find all the people in the story and pray for them and love them and kind of bring it back. That's what I love seeing the pictures, and I know it's the cutesy stuff, but with all the dramatic stuff, I love the cutesy stuff on Facebook right now. And I love when I see, the police officers that are going into neighborhoods and helping communities and loving on little kids. And I loved seeing the Chicago church that went out and laid hands on police officers and said, we are so 100% behind you. Our desire is not at all to bring you harm or to cause harm to your families. Our desire is to talk about this subject, and the fact that you're undergoing this kind of trauma, we're gonna be here with you on that. So both sides of this, right? So Jesus was radical in saying, pushing it all the way out and somehow fold that in as love. And so I think sometimes we got to remind ourselves how radical the gospel really is. Jesus, I'm very careful to say at all steps, because you would rightly flag me if I did anything to say I promoted violence, right? If you didn't walk out of this church and never come back, if I said there should be violence, then something's wrong, okay? But man, this morning I was like, what do I do with Jesus clearing the temple violently? I'm like, man, that really messes with my theology. I don't know what to make of that. And then the high priest that killed all the other Israelites, slaughtered them and purify. I'm like, man, I don't know. God, it's historical. It's a historical narrative in the Old Testament. So it's not really a command. Wait, hey, God, what did you think of that? It's in Scripture, but did you agree with that? Or was that dude just a little too extreme? What's going on? So, I mean, it's hard to figure out what the heck's going on. What I know is Jesus is radically committed to love. He's radically against people in power oppressing people not. Doesn't matter what stripe they are, what vocation they are. And he's radically about God being at the center, and that we don't co-opt that message for our comfort or for consumeristic reasons, which is what was happening in the temple when people were selling things. And so how do we not become like that? Well, we insulate ourselves by socioeconomic kind of categories. So we're with people that already kind of think like us. The people that are commenting on our Facebook feed are the friends we have, which again is reinforcing kind of our existing beliefs. And we don't have a culture that really has a value for deep conversation or listening to other people and wrestling it all the way through. We're very quick to end conversations with an againstness move of putting people in a box, putting out our emotion or stopping it based on our opinion. And so we just don't have the values for trying to sit in this space. And our toes are because we've lost that. This is the fear all last night and through the night was we don't have thick skin on our toes. Like if I know I'm coming in here and stepping on toes today, but that's scary to me because we're not used to that anymore. We don't sit around the house with uncles and aunts and grandparents and cousins and all sorts of people every week on the Sabbath, like maybe once we did, where we get all those different opinions and we learn to just go, heck, that's just Uncle Harry, but I love him anyways. Like we're not used to that exercise of discourse, right? And so our toes are sensitive. And so I want to be sensitive that the goal isn't to hurt toes, the goal is to stir it going forward.